Welcome to Coastside Fire Protection District Board of Directors Special Board Meeting. Open session and discussion on the strategic plan. Roll call, please. Is Kai going to do that?
I can handle that for you, Mr. President. Director McKimmey,
Here.
Director Sherrill, Director Stockman,
Here.
Vice President Cockrell,
Here.
and President Burke.
Here. With your permission, we'll skip the pledge of allegiance for this meeting. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this time? None. Hearing none, we will close the public comment period and go to new business, review and discuss the strategic business plan. Chief Cox, are you going to open this up?
Thanks, yeah, I can just open it with, this is the second meeting of the strategic plan. The kind of the context set, the board has had a strategic plan for a number of years. We came to the regular board meeting for review. It came to the attention that some special meetings would be needed to kind of go further in depth on it. This is the second of those two meetings. There is the current strategic plan as an attachment, as well as the document that Director Sherrill provided.
Very good. And then, Cynthia, I guess I'd look to you to give some comments or take this in any direction you like.
Thank you so much, sir. This is, thank you, Chief Cox, also, which was very correctly said, we met in November, and the director to talk about, to review the existing plan that was completed in 2021, and to talk about what were the key elements going forward. And the result of that meeting was the direction you gave to us, that we could continue that discussion today to that at some point we would update and refresh the text of the strategic plan. And that all of the topics of discussion for this December meeting be related directly to the mission of the district. And so with that direction, we provided a document that you'll see. Our strategic plan should clearly articulate who we are, what we do, and our vision for a progressive, healthy agency. Currently, we're physically sound, and our firefighters have new equipment with more on the way. As a board, our strength is our ability to work efficiently and to get things done collegially. Updating and refreshing the strategic plan will strengthen the board, and we will get there together. So from the website, the quote is, the Coastside Fire Protection District is an independent government body managed and controlled by a locally elected 5-member board of directors. The board has full responsibility for all policy, performance, and finances of the district. The mission of the district is to protect lives, the environment, and property through fire protection, suppression, emergency medical and rescue actions, and public education. So, then we get into how our district is primarily funded by property tax, which hasn't decreased in 40 years, but that is not the subject of this meeting. So we'll skip through that interesting factoid. And really go to what we would like to suggest we might do going forward. And that is that we would like to propose that there be a strategic planning committee of the board established. Yes, sir.
So when you say we, it's you, correct? Because you created this document?
I sat with Cynthia also, so we sat and discussed.
Okay, so we mean you too.
Yes,
Okay.
right. So yes, that would be we.
So the thought here is that just as you look at the initiatives that were on the 2021 plan, this list of initiatives that are things that were to be accomplished, right? You'll see that on that list, which is, and it's a little bit hard to read because it's the back side of the page, but you'll see that almost all of these elements have been accomplished. So congratulations, that's a lot of work that's been accomplished through time. But since we're at the end of the list here, now looking forward, we should think about what initiatives we should add. So towards that end, there are 3 components to this. The first is an education of the board component, so that we can create the strongest possible board to serve district constituents. The second part is to understand what the CAL FIRE contract is made of, what it's, to understand the factors involved with the contract, just for our own edification. It's something that, we want to understand. What are the set points with it? What are the areas that are flexible? What are the things that we can do to understand how it affects the life cycle of firefighters? To understand the contract deliverables, to ensure that they're the optimal deliverables for the coast side, which is an interesting mix of, woodland areas as well as urban areas and suburban areas. And then finally, the third section is to strengthen relationships with the community and with allied agencies. So to keep it simple, there are just these three major components. It's a beginning, it's now the final. This is really a work plan to develop additional information. 1A is to improve the communication and deep dive in understanding every aspect of the board member's responsibility. This is really board self-education. And it could be that the three board members with great depth of experience, they already know this and do. And it's really just the two newer board members who need to spend some time with this. But it's something that could come up over and over as different board members are on board. So to rotating committee assignments. Right now, committee assignments, to be efficient, and it does work efficiently, are, you have an assignment, you're assigned to it, but through time, your expertise and the decision-making that you have regarding those areas of expertise has become siloed. And so to make those silos more permeable, so that there's a rotating opportunity for people to learn more, board members to learn more about different committee assignments. And then ultimately, this committee, once we've accomplished these 3 points, and there are 3 subpoints each, we would refresh the language of the existing business, the strategic plan of the board. So in the second aspect of this, to understand the factors involved with attracting and retaining the strongest roster of high-performing personnel for the coast side, to understand the life cycle of firefighter careers, identify challenges to success on the coast side, and to identify contract deliverables, ensure that they are the optimal deliverables to meet coast side needs, and understand where compliance is. Again, I know this is an incredibly sensitive subject. My thought here is to understand. It is not to change. It is to understand. And right now, as a board member, I need to understand more about these elements. I don't have a firm grasp of the contract itself. I don't know how it's, I don't know what its flexibilities are. I don't know. I think Chief Cox does a magnificent job of letting us know when we say, can we do this? Is this possible? You tell us straight up whether it is or not. But since I have a responsibility for all of these different policies and administration, it would be good for me to understand the full contract. That's what this is about. And to strengthen relationships with community and allied agencies. This is just common sense. The good news about where we are today, based on all the good work that's gone forward, and especially reaching, so you have reached across the void. There was a little bit of an abyss there for a tiny bit of a while, between the city, the county, law enforcement, and fire services. And what I see, and I work with it all the time, I see that coming together. I see a greater, because of your outreach, a greater willingness for the other agencies to work together and to include fire services, and for fire services to include them in this overall unified command situation that has to happen when there is a regional emergency. So that is all progress. And all around multiple agencies around us, we see progress. We have a new city manager who wants to cooperate. We have a new sheriff who wants to cooperate. We have a new coast side person in charge of coast side law enforcement who wants to cooperate. So we have the volunteers who are doing work to service the community. We have CERT, who's been successful in its attempts to make entrance into the 32 neighborhoods that we have on the coast side, and to do things that reflect positively on the coast side. All of these larger voices will make for a stronger coast side emergency response when the time comes. And that's the effort here. See?
Yeah, a couple things. I think you can see, hopefully you recognize my fingerprints on this, because there are things that I've been talking about the whole time I've served on this board, and before I took a seat on the board. You know, some of the things about educating ourselves, greater sharing of participation within the committees. The need for a better engagement with those that we serve, right? Whether it's through technology or greater encouragement of looking more forward. All those things I think I've said almost constantly publicly within us, as well as individual conversations with most of you. I say that because I don't want this, you know, Cynthia did the majority of this work of writing it up, but it came from conversations we had together. And also the realization that you've got basically 2 new board members. I share the views that Cynthia has expressed, that this board has done a remarkable job. And I think all of us that have served on it has put the board in a good place. But because of my own personal background and being more progressive, I always feel that the board could be functioning better. So when this original strategic plan was presented, it was like, it could be more than this. This could be an opportunity now to strengthen it through defining it. And that was with the board president's direction of like, well, what does that mean? Come back to us with specifics of what you're talking about. So, but most of all, I'm anxious to have your input on the 3 of you of how you feel about that, being the senior members of the board. But let me get on the point, because I'm not going to have the ability to have input on it on the committee positions later, because my term will be done. But the committee, let me talk specifically about the siloing, which I agree with. It works because we've got the people with the interest and the knowledge in those spots to affect those committees. But the weakness in that, in my view, is like, from my own personal experience of being involved in that emergency preparedness aspects of the coast side for over 4 years, is that I think I've done a good job of coming back, and Cynthia as a new member, in reporting to you of what's happening within that committee and what's happening with the coast side. And you've been very responsive and asked questions back. So the communication there is good, but that's different in these committee positions from you actually being involved in those groups, from each of us having the ability, whether it's 1 year, you know, I'm very aware of the time that I put into that individually, and what's required of there being a switch of another person coming in and reforming those relationships, and the time it takes to understand that, to be effective in that and to have input. But I think it makes a better product. It makes it healthier. So that was my influence on, and which again, I've expressed before to this entire board, of more rotation, more involvement of all board members within each of the committees. So that's where that element came from. But I would say, let's pause for a minute and, you know, here's what we came back with. So give me your impressions, you know, from the 3 of you of how you read this, and Chief Cox. Let's start with Chief Cox, and then we'll go to the board members. We'll put you on the hot seat. So
Yeah, and I don't want to deflect, because I think it is not, but I kind of will, in the sense that it's the board. I see the board as the governing agency and elected officials, and I, you know, as a staff member, am really here to implement what the board wants.
Right.
So I would hate to like kind of give too much input onto the strategy,
Right.
and that really is the kind of elected official realm. When it talks specifically about CAL FIRE, I think I start thinking about what I can do to start getting information across, so I appreciate that. Even that being on there, I can start to compile information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to answer without answering it.
Yeah, absolutely. So. You want to start, Gary, or?
Bruce,
Go
or,
ahead, please.
you know, first of all, I would avoid the 2 and 3 denominator that would try to we're a group.
Yes, we are.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I think
so,
we've proven that.
Sometimes senior members have difficulty remembering things, so we're a group to do it. Yeah, but on a serious note, look, I appreciate the effort and the time and the comments you made in this outline that you had today, and I'll have some comments. Some will be supportive, I suspect. Some likely probably will go a different direction. And we all do things based upon our experience, and I've had the experience of saying, there's all this hundreds of books probably written on strategic planning. I mean, you can go to sleep for months just reading some of those books. I've sat in on numerous strategic planning sessions. I've actually conducted a few of them. So there's a wide range of what's available and the outcomes that can come of those types of things. And I think I mentioned the last time that to me, the basic premise is the fact that you focus on whatever the mission of the organization is, and you do not go outside of that and try to build a new organization or something like that. And a second crucial item is that it's not subjective, what the new objects is, and it's measurable, and that you can get it done in time. When we go beyond and think that we needed, for example, a new communication system, that sounds great, looks great on paper, doesn't contribute a bit, really doesn't. I mean, unless you say, okay, what did you do? When did you do it? What's the result of it? So I'm very focused on getting things done specifically. A couple of the general comments I may come back to. Some time ago, this district had some very lengthy strategic planning sessions, and probably my colleagues might remember some of them. But when I first came here, there was a strategic plan that had just been, I think, completed at the time, and it had a lot of people involved in it, and it took someplace around here, probably there's a copy of it, and it never got off the ground. I mean, it just had so much in it, and so much debate, and so it had, among other things, building a new building out here where the tower is, building a new building that would be the home for the volunteers, and that was subject to all kinds of discussion and so forth. But it was an example of not being specific and getting it done. The board also went off-site and had a couple of meetings. One was in the East Bay that was trying to get us to develop a board session, and I quite honestly the conductor of that meeting wasn't very good, and we got no place. Some of the to continue, and then I'll shut up in a minute. But as we were a few years ago in dire straits in a lot of areas, operations and finance and so forth, to try to zero in on strategic items that were badly needed and that were measurable and related to our mission was somewhat easier. They were kind of a bigger item and all that type of thing. The example is hiring CAL FIRE, was a major strategic operation. I'm sure Bruce remembers a major strategic one was merging Point Montero and Half Moon Bay. I mean, those are big items, but as things hopefully improved over the years, the kind of major items that I would call major have kind of been handled, and we come down to the things that you see on our current list. We have completed the initiatives that are on here beginning in 2016. If we started keeping track back, before that, you see a long list of much more meatier items that are here today. Putting, I'll give you one last example, hiring or engaging paths for our healthcare thing was a highly debatable item. And the board talked about it for a long time. Nobody else had done it. PAS was kind of a new deal. But we put it in the strategic plan and did it. But that was a major item that clearly has shown benefits in the ensuing time. But I'm open to consider a number of things. And I'm going to stop for a minute. The fellow comments you mentioned and on this paper, I'd like to comment on more specifically, but that's just my sense of it, my background in taking a look at it. But clearly, the people I said first, it relates, whatever we put on this thing relates directly to the mission. It is not subjective, it is very objective and it's measurable.
Absolutely, and I agree with all the points you're making, President Byrd. When you look at these points, this is not a strategic plan. I spent 30 years doing strategic planning around the world.
Yeah.
This is just the next phase of initiatives that have to do with improving board's education and knowledge and deepening our understanding of what it is we're exactly responsible for. That's all this was. It's called a strategic plan because that's the element that was how it was raised to us. But all of these elements are just, and all of them are quantifiable. All of them. Think for a second about the vegetation action plan, if you will. We have a plan for vegetation action, which came out of the vegetation committee, and there's a subset of that that's called vegetation action plan, and it's point, and it has a schedule on it. And that's exactly what these things are. This is to say, let's keep working on improving ourselves as a board. And each of these elements could be considered like an element in vegetative action plan to say, we'll bring back to the board this, we'll study and do this, we'll come back and report on this. And the board can decide what it wants to do with that information, but not have that information that honestly, if we had it today, we wouldn't have written it down and put it on this list. And again, I agree, we can't go to 3-2 again, but it might be that what is already in your very experienced, very expert minds on this is simply not in us. We just don't have this knowledge. So we are seeking this knowledge, not to undermine or change anything that has been so carefully put in place so far, but to say to ourselves, what do we need to do to get better going forward? And that's what this is, a set of initiatives to create a stronger board.
And I think with that, one note that I put down on here was all of this. When we talk about educating the board, and I've said this before also, is that when anytime where I feel it's talking about educating amongst us, we're really talking about educating the community, right? So if there's not a clear in all of this, if in us clarifying it, clarifies it to the public, whether or not we have participants in the room or online following us, it's still historical as saying, this is where we're at and what we're doing. A key role in governing. So I just want to add that too. So as we sit here, I can, like Cynthia said, and that whole, like when talking about 3-2, it's that you guys have been here longer. So maybe in your past experience, like you just expressed, you've gone through that. So that is a personal experience. You're bringing it up as like, we've studied this, we knew this. I was here when we established this contract. We talked about this contract before, but you always have to come back around and make sure that not only the entire board and any new members have that understanding, but also continue to tell the community of like, this is what our product is, this is what we're doing, so.
It's really to educate us.
JB.
You know, I could say speak with both an outsider and now I'm happy to say an insider. Going all the way back to 1991. And where I was, before that, I was a volunteer myself. And then I became a very interested citizen, if you will. And Bruce may recall, they never had a meeting that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to know what was going on, and I was very free with some of my opinions. And so I guess, you know, this is gonna oversimplify it. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you have it, for example, if you have a, it's the analogy you might not like, but if you have a car, everything about it is working right. It's just, you know, now if your hobby is injuring the car, okay, tear out the transmission, tear out the, you know, change the valves, you know, put a different exhaust. That's your hobby. But if the car you have is well designed and is working the way it's supposed to work, let it do what it's supposed to do.
Why are we?
Don't start changing it. And I infer from reading this, that there's it's not stated directly, but that we're not doing all the things that we could be doing to improve ourselves. Now, the reality is, fire is static. It hasn't changed for thousands of years. Fire is fire. The only thing we're seeing that is a little different is the medical piece. We now the fire department, quasi first responder doctor, if you will. Pardon me?
We shouldn't never change.
Well, no, we should always look, we shouldn't change for change sake. That's my whole point. I guess that could be said in one sentence.
And that's what you feel is change for Tuesday.
I would say, what I would say, I had some opinions when I came on board, and some of them have been acted in a very positive way. This is not being done right.
I don't feel that.
And I think you gotta find where there's an issue and make us aware of it. And again, it can be done by the public, it can be done through administration in a number of different ways. It can be done by a board member found out something when you attend another board meeting.
Right, but that's not the purpose of this at all.
Okay,
I don't have an agenda or something in mind
okay,
that's wrong, that I'm going after the next. What I'm doing is learning more, so that my decisions are more informed
okay,
and come from a depth of knowledge. Real quantifiable, real knowledge about these subjects, about which truly I don't feel I know enough about to execute the job I've been elected to do, which is to take full responsibility for all policy performance and finances of the district. I want to learn more. I need to learn more, and I'm not the last one who's gonna want to learn more. Everybody you bring on this board is gonna have the same questions, and that's what this is.
Excuse me, just interrupt, because I think the 20 minutes that we've been talking about here, I've got a different perspective of what it is we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
Because I was thinking that there was going to come out of this a specific item on strategic plan that would do it. As I listen and read this, what now I see is more towards an education
Yes,
aspect of it. And I think the name strategic plan has kind of confused the issue.
it has, it absolutely has.
As I now look at some of the things you suggested, you a little bit differently than I might have, whether it was labeled strategic plan.
Let's change
Bruce?
We do need to, maybe it's the strategic committee, we do need new initiatives with dates on there.
Yes.
That's look like cut and dry. Our last pending one is increased revenue reserved for 10 million for new fire station 44. Have we done that? So that's accomplished. There's not a target anymore, so we need a new set of completed or goals, initiatives.
yes, absolutely.
And if that's a subcommittee, that'd be fine with me, I don't care, or we talk about it as a group, it's all good. I have no interest in rotating committee assignments, I've talked to Steve about this. It's not even, I'm not an expert builder, and I've been building for 45 years. Do I know everything? No, not even maybe. But I feel that's a strong point, and the fire service background is also a strong point of mine. Like I've talked with Chief Cox, when I hear something about a call or, piece of equipment or something, I'll come to him directly and get it ironed out. So I've talked to, like I said, I talked to Steve about rotating committee assignments. I'm not that guy. I'm not, Gary's taken over my responsibilities for the Special Districts Association, which meets every now and again, and the JPA, which meets every now and again, and he's stronger suited to that, or somebody else besides me. So that's,
Should we all be limited by what you want to do?
should you all be limited to what I want to do? No, you're not gonna force me to attend a meeting I don't want to attend, or
That's-
participate in something I don't want to participate in. Oh, please. Please.
That's what we're asking you to do.
But if
No
you're,
one wants to force you to do anything.
right, so, but if you're rotating committee assignments.
You can decide what you want to do.
Yeah, let me interrupt that point just for a moment. Our board policy manual states, and I'm agreeing, I jotted it down here, may not be quite accurate, but what it does say is that assignments on committees, if you will, and the consideration should be given to relevant training and experience that people have. That doesn't rule out, new education, but consideration should be given for the building experience that he does. Bruce and JB had a meeting on 44. Frankly, I looked at the first page, I didn't know what the hell they're talking about. I really didn't. So I have no value to the district or community for my being on that. So I think there's a middle ground to doing that, but experience and background, I think, is correct. Now, let me add one other thing, I mentioned this before. The committees and liaison people are not sacrosanct. In other words, if we have a finance committee and a board member wishes to sit in as a member of the public and listen to it, they're able to do that. Or if there's a member that might want to go to a particular liaison and simply says to a board member, can I take your place? You can go to it. I mean, there's maximum flexibility of doing this. Let me jump to my suggested thing. As I said earlier, I think the education aspect of the board, I think, is laudable and reasonable to do that type of thing. Now, some of it should be done through an orientation meeting with the chief to go over some of the basic kinds of things that might be done. I can foresee that a group or committee, an ad hoc committee, maybe making a list of perhaps half a dozen things that you have included in here. Let's say, just to pick an example, one is the Cal Fire contract. So that at one of our board members, at the meeting on the agenda, we would spend X number of minutes, and the chief will go through and elaborate on what the Cal Fire contract is, what it is not to do with that, and you will find how inflexible it really is. That's what you'll find, but it's educational to do it. But I think having viewing the operating plan as part of that review would be updating to all of us, including me. So I would suggest, that a list of those items that you kind of touched on here that we can go through. And I'm not sure what the number is, but I just think the Cal Fire contract is one. I had mentioned offline that I think there's some things that need to be done relative to our understanding of the role of volunteers in the organization. So maybe one of the items would be our new upcoming policy on volunteers and how the board policy, not the manual, what's in here, board policy. But I think in that way, we all could Some of them may be redundant to or some of us, I think, would be education. We all could learn, and out of that would come perhaps some new directions, some new something to do out of that education background, some new direction. I'll shut up.
No, that's exactly the way I hope this would go. We would have an opportunity to delve into these ideas and these elements of education, not to force anyone to do what they don't want to do, but to give an opportunity to someone who wants to be involved, a way to do it, which right now, it's a little bit structured, so.
Okay, then I would look to yourself and new board member, as well as your background from Steve, to provide I guess just a list, if you will, that you would bring to the board, and you would put it on the agenda with itemized to cover something each month, or educational. Maybe it's a special need like this one. This is a very lengthy, deep item. And I'm going to give you one, and that's the end of that comment. Period. New comment. I just personally, I'm not trying to influence anybody else, but my role on this board to be the obviously serving the community, doing all the other things. And I'm not about to try to build a new organization with new organizations and committees.
You're
And
not
so forth.
suggesting-
And I have limits on what I think, we should do and how we can do it. And as long as we can improve everything within that parameter, I'm all for it.
Thank you, thank you, and that's all we're trying to do here, is to create a path forward that allows us to deepen and improve.
Then I think that's good, and I would look forward to seeing whatever the list is or the subjects that you think need to be updated and.
Right here, but, I'll read,
Excuse me?
they're right here, sir. I wrote them down.
Oh, yeah.
But I can write them again,
Well,
in a way that
what I
looks
would like
more
to
like
see,
a vegetation action plan. That's what you'd like to see.
yes, if I understood the point, that you would like, that you're proposing to be as a study session to educate all of us.
Whoever wants to be educated.
Well,
I'm not gonna-
What agenda for limited specific time.
Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds great, that would be wonderful.
And but I'm just saying, I'd like to see the list come from you, maybe when we see the list, just the line item list of the subject, maybe some of us might have an addition, or,
That'd be wonderful.
but then we would provide that to the staff and ask them to
This is.
put it on the agenda.
So I would say two things, is one, like, in developing this and reviewing it after Cynthia wrote it out, it's like, these are kind of like, I didn't anticipate anybody even feeling that there wasn't something here that needed to be done, or that would benefit the district and those that we serve, right? So I understand the argument of like, hey, everything's working fine, we don't need to add things to it. But to these points, there's nothing controversial or that you would say, I don't think that's needed. I think we can all agree that to better educate ourselves, to better educate the community, to better engage with the community, to find a different way. And again, that's why I asked Chief Cox to come up with the operational plan, because him and I specifically, when we worked on the operational plan, it was just brainstorming those ideas. It's like, how can we do this? How can we have a better measure of the service that we're providing? How do we do that? How do we get feedback from that? How do we more recognize our employees? How do we retain employees? Right? So some of that's crossed over into this. And I'll give you that these aren't really strategic in a way. They're not the way that the strategic plan has been used or has been written. And so we're looking to follow that. It's like, and Bruce brought up, okay, what are the next things we're going to add to this that's measurable? But within that, so let's even separate those two things right now, because we're getting confused about whether or not these things apply to the strategic plan and our role as the board. But I would find it hard for anybody to argue that all these points that were made with Cynthia and I's work would not benefit the board and those that we serve. So, and again, I highly respect the view of that we all come from a different place and a different view on what our role is in here. But within that, it still has to find what our mission is as board members and the mission of the fire service, as well as the district and as well as CAL FIRE. So, it all fits in there. So let's make that our starting point of like, how do we do this? I think we all agree that these points would have a benefit. So how do we do that? How does that fit in? That can be a discussion with the fire chief and the unit chief of like you brought up from the beginning, Jonathan, is like, okay, I recognize that there's ways that I can start adding this in to make sure that my new board members have a better education, enhance the public. So how we do that, this doesn't need to be trapped within the strategic plan or force it to fit in here. But I think as this board moves in, moves forward, and especially with two members, let's look for a place to do that. And also, I disagree, JB, with your view of the fire service, that it's like a car and it's the same thing, and why reinvent it and why tinker with it. These two individuals, our unit chief and fire chief, I think would stand by that the fire service is changing every single day and is progressing, and the tools that they have to be the operational tools they have and that they have to adapt to each day are almost drowning in that. And that I think we should, as a board, take that look at operational model also as a way that we keep adapting, because as their needs, as the needs change for the communities we serve, and the tools change for those that provide the service, also as a board, we have to adapt at the same time, and we have to see that happening at all the same time. And we're intertwined to that. As much as we want to just stay with the way that we do it, and it works and it has structure and it's safe and it's predictable, I agree. And for it to really function well, it has to have that structure all the time. I especially think, Gary, that you provide. You bring it back. You bring it back. You bring it back. That's very important. So don't be afraid at the same time of expanding out and looking on how we can do it better, how we can communicate better. And again, that's not the role specifically of the board, but it is the role of the board to tell our staff and to tell the CAL FIRE model of how we think we can do that within this community, and how we strengthen who we are as a district, as well as we partner with CAL FIRE to make the best product. We welcome that. I welcome that, and I'll continue to be that as a community member, but I don't want to.
Let's see if we can wrap this up, and that I'd like to see if you would mind, as I mentioned earlier, providing specific things and educational items that you think the board should be brought up to date on, look at, and everything, the CAL FIRE. Okay, I'd like to see, if you will, I think it'd be helpful to have that as that particular group, whatever you want to call it, in our meeting as a discussion item, and then subsequent to that, we will put it on the agenda and type on one at a time, or however. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for that opportunity. And we could just ditch the whole strategic plan vein if that's the problem.
Well, I think that confused, in my mind, it can, yeah. That's
One thing I think we can all agree on, something that I found only one word, and I kept looking at the other word. And there's two things,
Okay,
education
yes,
and communication.
yes,
And I think we can all agree on that. And there's no downside there
that's
at all. And it's not going to be controversial. And education and communication will lead inevitably, in my opinion, to a stronger board. Okay, all right.
excellent.
Thank you. There's no other comments? This session, special session is adjourned, and thank everybody. Okay.
And I plead guilty to being one of the good old boys.